Hi, students. How are you? Today we are going to do a lesson. Let me move myself out of the way. Let's see. All right. Today we're going to do a lesson about poetry. Last week we talked about Kamala Harris, and this week we're going to talk about this woman in the picture. Her name is Amanda Gorman, and she is only 22 years old, and she's the young woman that read her poem at the inauguration, and her poem was titled "The Hill We Climb." So we're going to be talking about some different kind of vocabulary in this. And when people use poetry, I don't know if you enjoy poetry, maybe in your country, in your own native language. I really like poetry because it often paints a picture with language. So now that you are at the level that you're at, most of you are toward the end of level 4 because we've finished the level 4 material, and I feel like you're pretty high in your language. So this is going to be, I think, really fun for us and good to stretch your vocabulary and see how you can use English vocabulary to paint a picture and talk about some big ideas. So the first thing I'd like us to do is to actually listen to her poem. I'm going to play it here. It's only 5 minutes long, and it has the captions where you can read along. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to read a story together about Amanda Gorman. So let's listen to it first.
Mr. President, Dr. Biden, Madam Vice President, Mr. Emhoff, Americans, and the world. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace. In the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is hours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny Black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew. That even as we hurt, we hoped. That even as we tired, we tried. That we'll forever be tied together, victorious. Not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promised glade, the hill we climb if only we dare it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared it at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So, while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens. But one thing is certain: if we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the west. We will rise from the wind-swept northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked south. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed even just listening to that. In poetry, you hear the rhythm. It is like a song. It's using words to paint a picture. And so now let's read a little bit about Amanda Gorman. And actually, before we do the reading, let's take a look at some of the vocabulary that you're going to want to know for the reading. All right, so there are the first 5 words. So I'll go through and read these for you. And when you're at home going through these, as I say the word, I want you to also practice saying it. Some of these words we talked about last week on Zoom, like democracy, we talked about that, and inaugural, we talked about those. So the first word is inaugural, inaugural. Remember, we talked about watching the inauguration of the president and the vice president. Okay, inaugural is an adjective. It's related to the inauguration. The next word is shatter, shatter. The next word is democracy, democracy. Stirring, stirring. And this last word has to do with poetry. Alliteration, alliteration. Only really we don't hear that as a T. We hear that T sounds like a D. when we say it fast. Alliteration. Alliteration. All right, let's look at the definitions. The first one says, causing great emotion. If something is this word, it means that it caused great emotion. Okay, so this is actually only one meaning of this word. So maybe you want to take a guess at what this could be. If something is this, it causes great emotion. So actually, in this case, that word is stirring. Many people said that the poem that Amanda Gorman wrote and read was quite stirring, okay? So I know you think of stirring like you are stirring a pot of soup or something you cooked, you are stirring it. If you only stir a little, okay? But then you can also stir vigorously, right? So maybe in a poem it is the same way. You maybe start slow and then more and more and more. This is like, what is it doing to a person's emotions? The more it goes, it builds and it builds and it creates more emotion. So it can cause great emotion if the poem is stirring. And her poem was very stirring. The idea was to create hope for American people. Okay, let's look at our next definition. This one says that we are looking for the word related to the inauguration, which means the beginning of a new presidency. So this one will be easy for you to find because it almost has the same word in it. So we're looking for a word that is related or connected to the word inauguration. What word do you think that one will be? So if you chose inaugural, you are correct. Inaugural, inauguration. So we say this was an inaugural poem. It was something that was read at the inauguration of the president. Okay, here's the next definition. To suddenly, which means quickly or in an unexpected way, to break apart. To suddenly break apart. Okay, so do you have a guess? To suddenly break apart is to shatter. So you could, many times we use that word when we're talking about glass. Like maybe your window, if someone threw a ball against the window and you were inside and all of a sudden you hear the sound and it is glass breaking, that is a sound of shattering glass, a shatter. To suddenly break apart. Okay, this next one is a type of government. So it is a government that is chosen freely by the people. So normally it is a government where people vote. Okay, so they have the freedom to vote. It is that type of government. All right, so that there's only one here that is a type of government. So that is democracy. In America, we say we live in a democracy. All right, that only leaves one word left, so it must be this last one. So the definition is similar sounds at the beginning of closely placed words. So words that are close together in a sentence or phrase, and the sounds of the words are similar. That is called alliteration. Alliteration. In poetry, they use alliteration as an effect. It is part of the idea of the poem, of the rhythm of the poem. And the way that it sounds It's part of the idea of building the emotion and making a stirring poem. Alliteration. All right, so we did 5 words. Let's find our next set of words. All right, so we have 5 more, and some of these you know. Like the first one, I think we've talked about gratitude before. Gratitude. Again, it's a T, but that T sounds a little bit like a D. Gratitude. Gratitude. Okay, this next one is 2 words. Speech. I think you know speech, like talking, right? Speech impediment. Speech impediment. This one is 2 words with a hyphen in between. Jam-pack. Jam-pack. This next one, verbalize. Verbalize. And the last one, debut. So you don't hear the T. It just goes debut. Debut. So gratitude, speech impediment, jam-pack, verbalize, and debut. All right, so the first definition is a problem that affects speaking ability. So this is a problem that affects how well you can speak. Okay, and they give an example is a stutter. Like President Biden has a stutter. When he was a child, his stutter was worse. So an example of a stutter is when someone has a hard time with the flow of their speaking. So they might say the same word over and over again. For example, he said that he had a hard time saying his last name. People would say, "What is your name?" And he would say, Joe Biden. So you may have noticed when he is speaking, sometimes President Biden will still have a hard time with the flow of his speaking. All right, so which of these do you think that is? Hopefully you guessed this one, speech impediment. So speech, you know, it's just speaking, right? Impediment means some kind of problem, okay? So you can have a physical impediment, you can have a speech impediment. This was a speaking impediment. As we're going to learn when we read the story, the author of the poem, Amanda Gorman, she too had and still has a speech impediment. So she connected with the president. She could relate to the president because they both suffered with a speaking or a speech impediment. Okay, the next definition, it says to say in words. To say something with words. Which of these 4 words do you think means to say something with words? Okay, hopefully you picked verbalize. Verbal means spoken. Verbalize is a verb that means to put things, to speak something, that it is spoken, to verbalize. Not just to think it, but to actually speak it, to verbalize. So to say it in words is to verbalize. Okay, the next definition says to fill up completely. So there's not any more room left. To completely fill something up. Okay, so if something is completely filled up, for example, if you are in a bus and it is completely full, there is not room, not even one more person can get on the bus, then we say that it is jam-packed. Okay, so to completely fill it up is to jam pack it. All right. This one I think you will get. Thankfulness, or to appreciate one's blessings. To be very thankful. Okay, which of these words is talking about thankfulness or being thankful, counting your blessings? Hopefully you chose gratitude. Gratitude comes from the word grateful, which is the same as thankful. So we will put that here. Gratitude, thankful. All right, so our last word is debut. Debut. A debut is the first performance or the first release of a type of art form. That is called debut. So let's take this and move it down here. Debut, the first performance. So this was her debut performance of her poem, The Hill We Climb. That wasn't her first poem. She's performed other poems, but it was her debut performance in front of the president. It was her debut performance of that poem, which was written especially for the inauguration of President Biden and Kamala Harris. All right, so we are finished with our words. Now, when you read, you are going to watch for those words. So let's read a little bit about Amanda Gorman. And this article, it says, comes from the Washington Post. The Washington Post is a well-respected newspaper. So this is an article from there. Okay, so I will read it aloud and you can follow. We will practice reading this together when we meet on Zoom next Monday afternoon and Tuesday morning. So you can practice reading this at home if you like. So it says, Los Angeles poet, she is from Los Angeles poet Amanda Gorman delivered, that just, in this case, delivered means she read it. Sometimes delivered means when the Amazon man comes and gives you a package, but delivered can also mean when someone sings or reads something. So Los Angeles poet Amanda Gorman delivered a stirring poem Wednesday at the inauguration titled The Hill We Climb. In doing so, Gorman, 22, became the youngest inaugural poet. She was reportedly recommended to the inaugural team by the new First Lady, Jill Biden. Gorman and her writing drew immediate praise on social media. An excerpt, that means a part, small part, of Gorman's poem, Courtesy NPR. So this next part is part of her poem. And you will remember maybe hearing it from watching the video. We've seen a force that would shatter, remember that meant to break apart? We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith, we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. So you might notice that there is some symbolism in poetry. They use words in a special way to give you new ideas. So we are going to talk about what these things mean when we are on Zoom. What does it mean for us to have our eyes on the future? What does it mean when they say history, that is all the things that happened in the past? What does that mean that history has its eyes on us? So you might think a little bit about that, and we'll have lots of times to talk about that together. My hope is that my poem, this is Amanda Gorman speaking, she says, my hope is that my poem will represent a moment of unity. You know, unity is coming together. So it's the opposite of fighting. A moment of unity for our country, she told the Washington Post book critic Ron Charles last week. She says that with my words, I'll be able to speak a new chapter and era for our nation. And that she did with a beautifully delivered poem full of alliteration and internal rhyme. You would never guess that a few years ago, Gorman was struggling with a speech impediment. As she told the Post earlier this year, writing was a means or a way of self-expression when she found herself unable to verbalize her thoughts. Music helped her to overcome or to get through her impediment, which included difficulty pronouncing the letter R. The cure, in part, turned out to be tunes or music from Lin-Manuel Miranda's Pulitzer Prize-winning musical. This is music from Hamilton. My favorite thing to practice was the song Aaron Burr, Sir, from Hamilton, because it was jam-packed, which means it's totally full of words with the letter R. And remember, R was the sound that she was not able to make because of her speech impediment. And I said, if I can keep up with Leslie, his last name Odom Jr., in this track, then I'm on my way to being able to say this R in a poem, she told CBS News. As a sign of gratitude, being thankful, Gorman tweeted that she included 2 references to Hamilton in The Hill We Climb. Miranda noticed and responded to Gorman on Twitter. So the songwriter from Hamilton messaged her and said to her, you were perfect, perfectly written, perfectly delivered, every bit of it. Bravo. So Gorman is set, this author of this Amanda Gorman is set to release 2 books this year. They are called Change Sings, that is a picture book for children, and also her debut poetry collection, also entitled The Hill We Climb. So both of those books are brand new books that you can pre-order them. They are not out yet. So you can find those on Amazon. Okay, there are some questions for you on here that you'll be able to answer. One thing I wanted you to see and for us to talk about is the idea that they use words in a special way when they do the poem. So just thinking about the title, The Hill We Climb, we have to think about, what do you think that the poet might mean when she says the hill? What is a hill? What hill is she talking about? So I want you to see a picture. This is a picture of Capitol Hill. This is the Capitol building, and many times we call this Capitol Hill. So you can see all of it, that it is a little bit set up, right? And you see all the stairs before you enter the building. And so maybe that is why we call that Capitol Hill. Now, we talked a little bit when we had Zoom last week. We talked about the attack on Capitol Hill, that there was a riot there, that that kind of violent mob tried to enter the building, and the police had to get them out of the building and to make peace. And so when Amanda Gorman calls this the hill we climb, is she talking about climbing this hill? What is she talking about? So I will ask you some of those questions. All right. Well, so let's go back to the questions that they are asking. All right. So here are some of the questions. We will not answer these questions right now, but I want you to see the questions so that you can think of them. So the first one is, who delivered the poem? Who read the poem? I think that is a pretty easy one. And then, what do you think that this poet, what was the poet's hope for the poem? What did she, what was her idea that she wanted to get, for people to get from writing this poem? And then I want you to go back and to listen again. And about 1 minute into the video, what does she talk about then? What does the poem say about democracy? Maybe go back and listen to it again and listen and see, what does the poem say about democracy? Okay, alliteration was one of the words that we defined, and we said that was where words sound similar to each other. Maybe they start with the same letters and they are close together in the same phrase. So when we work together on Zoom, we are going to find examples of alliteration. So if you can find any, that would be great. If you don't understand this, don't worry about it. We will do that together. But you are welcome to try to find some examples of alliteration. And also examples of rhyme. So rhyming is when two words sound the same. And then here they are talking about body language. So I know, Mohammed, you have many times talked about people's body language. How are they standing? Are they moving their hands? What does their face say? Okay. Can you talk about how did she look when she was reading her poem? How was she moving her body? Can you talk to me about that? So I will ask you those questions too. How did Amanda Gorman get the opportunity to share her poem at the inauguration? How did that happen? Do you remember that part of the story? And then, what hill did Amanda Gorman climb a few years ago, and how did she get to climb it? We'll talk about those things together. And we'll talk about the hill we climb. Remember, I said I was going to ask you, what hill does she mean? And what does it mean to climb a hill? What does that mean? What do you think she's talking about? Do you think that Amanda Gorman was an important part of President Biden's inaugural ceremony? Not every president has an inaugural poet, but President Biden chose to have Amanda Gorman read a poem there. Do you think that having her read that poem helped the ceremony? Was that important to the ceremony? And if you think yes, then why? If you think no, then why? Okay, during this inauguration, there was music, there was the poem, there were speeches. Do you think those things are helpful? Do they give people hope? What is your opinion about that? Now we are back to the idea of the hill we climb. Okay, this is your opinion, okay? Just your opinion. So you cannot have yes or no. Nothing is, this is just give me your opinion. Do you believe that President Biden has a big hill to climb in his job? And explain what you think about that. So those are some things that you can think about, all right, when you're thinking about this and when you are looking at these words. And I think I would recommend listening to her speech more than one time and looking over those words more than one time, because I am stretching your ability to work with the English language, because I think all of you are ready for that. But I know this lesson will not be easy, and it won't be what we normally do, all right? But I'm looking forward to having good conversation with you about this. But I would listen to her more than once if you get a chance to. It's only 5 minutes long. All right, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Today it is beautiful and sunny outside, so I hope you get a chance to get outside and enjoy the weather. Have a wonderful weekend, and I look forward to seeing you next week. All right, bye.